Hare Krishna. We will begin now reading from the book called Jaiva-gharma, written by Srila Bhaktivinode Thakur, translated into English by Sarvabhauma Das, and published by the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust. We will start with the introduction. This book, Jaiva-gharma, is a guide for those fortunate souls whose hearts yearn to attain the highest platforms of Krishna Prema. As such, it is the ecstatic endeavor of the author, Srila Bhaktivinode Thakur, to fulfill the desire of his beloved Lord, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In Chapter 2, the Thakur defines Jaiva-gharma, quote, the unblemished, pristine love for the Supreme Absolute Whole experienced by the minute particle of spiritual substance, the Jiva, is defined as Jaiva-gharma, end quote. To bestow this unblemished Krishna Prema, transcendental love of the Supreme Personality of Godhead upon the fallen souls of the material creation was in part the mission of the golden avatar Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Ecstatic love is the intrinsic nature of the relationship between the all-attractive Supreme Person, Sri Krishna, and his dear eternal servants, the jivas, the individual souls. However, just as the unlimited Lord is supremely independent, the tiny jivas, partaking of his nature, are minutely independent. The free exercise of this minute independence is a prerogative bestowed by the merciful Lord upon his servants, and finds its defining characteristic in the choice between the selfless service to the Lord and selfish service by the jiva to his own self. These mutually exclusive alternatives define the subsequent spheres of activity of the jiva. Those fortunate souls who surrender to the Lord live eternally under the shelter of his internal spiritual energy, engaged in his ecstatic pastimes with hearts that know only pure transcendental love. Ever attentive to the satisfaction of the Lord and their fellow servants, they eternally perceive and interact with him and his associates, immersed in unlimited, intoxicating happiness. They attain their innate constitutional relationship with the Lord as his transcendental servants, friends, parental figures, and conjugal lovers. Thus their Jaiva-gharma, intrinsic nature of ecstatic attachment to Godhead, finds unrestricted expression in the union of love with the Lord and his transcendental abode. The same cannot be said for those souls who reject the Lord and his service. For them there is no station in the spiritual world. Maya Devi, the great mistress of the mundane universes, manifested by the external material energy of the Lord, beckons such souls and covers their spiritual nature with a cloth of the subtle mental body and the outer dress of the gross material body. Now, forgetful of the Lord and their natural spiritual relationship with him, they are subjugated by the illusory potencies and consider themselves a product of the inferior material nature. in a mood of rebellion against the supremacy of the Lord, and thereby their own innate spiritual constitution, they consider their self to be the external material body, and items in relationship to the body to be their rightful possessions. With such a false conclusion, fear and anxiety pervade their consciousness as they consider death to be the inevitable, all-devouring end. Thus they launch into material life, attempting to control and enjoy before the final curtain falls. Pushed and pulled by the repulsion and attraction in the alien environment of the mundane energy, in bewilderment, they foolishly fear no sinful activity and become increasingly mad after material enjoyment. However, they are bound by the laws of karma, and when the time comes, their particular mixture of pious and impious activity defines their next arena of attempted material enjoyment. They find themselves reborn in another material body. Thus their karmic reactions sometimes heave them up to paradise in the higher, more subtle material planetary systems, or sometimes throw them down to hell. Ignorant of their previous births, the forlorn jivas rotate ceaselessly through the multifarious bodies of the lower material creation. Sometimes they attain birth as a human, sometimes as an animal, sometimes as a tree, and sometimes as an insect. Attaining rebirth within a human body, the jiva may inquire into the ultimate truth of existence, but still harboring a rebellious mentality, he becomes swayed by the philosophies that deny service and surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. Lamentably, the jiva becomes absorbed in voidism and impersonalism, which defines the infinitesimal jiva to be the ultimate and highest reality. In such madness, the jiva offensively considers himself the supreme, thus degrading himself even further than he did by previous purely sensual pursuits. With misery and ignorance as his constant companions, the jiva thus continually sojourns throughout the practically unlimited species of material life. How can this cycle be broken? How can the jiva uncover the lost treasure within his heart? How can he uncover his now dormant Jaiva-gharma, eternal, ecstatic Krishna Prema, transcendental love of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna? To answer these questions, Sri Krishna descends periodically from the spiritual realm, either in his original form or in the form of one of his multifarious avatars, to manifest his pastimes within the prison house of his external material creation. The Vedas, the grand handbooks of material and spiritual knowledge, inform us that time in the material world moves in a cyclic continuum of 4 ages, known as yugas. The present age is known as Kali Yuga, beginning 5,000 years ago, when the highest manifestation of the Supreme Person, Sri Krishna, returned to his transcendental abode after displaying his pastimes of transcendence at Mathura Mandala, India. The material conditions vary with each yuga, so in each yuga an avatar appears to teach the particular spiritual practice that is most effective for that age in uncovering the innate Jaiva-gharma of the fallen souls. These divine manifestations are known as Yuga avatars. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, the book described as the ripened fruit of the desire tree, that is the Vedas, the Yuga avatar for Kali Yuga is described. Krishna Varnam Trisha Krishnam Sangopangastra Parshadam Yagnai Sankirtanai Prayar Yajanti Sumeda Shaha. Quote, in the age of Kali, intelligent persons perform congregational chanting to worship the incarnation of Godhead, who constantly sings the names of Krishna. Although his complexion is not blackish, he is Krishna himself. He is accompanied by his associates, servants, weapons, and confidential companions. That's from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th Canto, 5th Chapter, 32nd Verse. This Kali Yuga avatar is Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who advented himself in Sridham Mayapur, Navadvip, West Bengal, India, on the Falguni Purnima evening in the year 1407 Shakabda, corresponding to February 1486, as the full moon arose under an eclipse. His life and teachings are most cogently described in 4 books: the Chaitanya Bhagavat of Sri Vrindavan Das Thakur, the Chaitanya Charitamrita of Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj, the Chaitanya Mangala of Lochan Das Thakur, and the Sri Chaitanya Charita of Srila Murari Gupta. In the 2nd chapter of the Chaitanya Bhagavat of Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur, we find description of the birth of the Kali Yuga avatar, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, during the simultaneous lunar eclipse. Quote, upon seeing the lunar eclipse, the residents of Navadvip began to loudly chant Harinam and make other auspicious sounds. Endless teeming millions congregated on the banks of the Ganges for holy ablutions and rent the air with loud chanting of the Lord's name. All the devotees experienced deep exhilaration and exclaimed, such great joy! Maybe the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna is making his appearance. The only sound within the universe was the all-pervading chanting of Hari, 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 Hari. Amidst the resounding adulations, the Lord and the very soul of the universe appeared as the son of Srimati Sachidevi. Rahu eclipsed the moon. The ocean of the holy name inundated Navadvip, drowning and subduing the darkness of Kali Yuga. The Supreme Lord was manifest. From the moment of his appearance, Sri Chaitanya revealed his mission. He would establish the fallen souls of Kali Yuga in their innate Jaiva-gharma by inaugurating the Harinam Sankirtan Yajna, the transcendental sacrifice of the congregational chanting of Sri Krishna Nam. Herein lies the most esoteric aspect of the avatar of Sri Chaitanya. Sri Chaitanya is Sri Krishna himself. However, intrigued by the position of his greatest devotee, Srimati Radharani, Sri Krishna clothes himself in her mood and complexion, entering the mood of devotion to himself. Thus he fulfills his desire to experience the role of a devotee, taste the nectar of his own service, and understand the qualities of himself which so attract his devotees. Thus, internally absorbed in the divine nectar of Krishna Prema, transcendental love of Godhead, he became anxious to distribute this intoxicating beverage to all lost souls without discrimination, thus bestowing upon them their Jaiva-gharma. Sri Chaitanya declares in the Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Leela, chapter 3, verses 19 and 20, Yuga Dharma Pravartanu Nama Sankirtan Chari Baba Bhakti Diya Nachamu Bhuvana Apani Karimu Bhakta Bhava Angikare Apani Achari Bhakti Sikaimu Savare. Quote, I shall personally inaugurate the religion of the age, Nama Sankirtan, the congregational chanting of Sri Krishna Nam. I shall make the world dance in ecstasy, realizing the four mellows of loving devotional service. I shall accept the role of a devotee, and I shall teach devotional service by practicing it myself. End quote. In this mission, the Lord is accompanied by four intimate associates, Sri Nityananda Prabhu, Sri Advaita Acharya Prabhu, Sri Gadadhar Pandit, and Sri Srivas Pandit, who together with the Lord form the Panchatattva, the five aspects of the Absolute Truth. Sri Chaitanya, though renowned in his early life as the greatest of scholars, Sri Nimai Pandit, left us only one composition, the Sri Shikshashtakam. However, within these 8 verses of 4 lines, all the transcendental truths of the Vaishnava philosophy taught by Sri Chaitanya are contained in a highly condensed form. The Lord orders his disciples, the foremost of which were known as the 6 Goswamis, to write books expanding and propounding these truths, a task which the followers of Sri Chaitanya have continued to the present day. What then is the weapon of Sri Chaitanya, as mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam shloka above? In chapter 2 of the Chaitanya Bhagavat, Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur describes the Lord's weapon, which became evident from the moment of his birth. His beautifully brilliant golden luster overshadowed the sun's shining rays and dazzled my eyes. His large, blossoming, soft, upturned lotus eyes defied description. His exquisite complexion was the color of glowing sandalwood paste. His expansive breast was decorated with a gently swaying wildflower garland, and his radiant moon-like face was pleasing, cooling, and comforting. His elongated arms reached down to his knees. The golden moon, Sri Chaitanya, had risen as sounds of great joy filled the air. His beauty humbled a million cupids at his own dancing and singing, and at his own dancing and singing he smiled. His lovely face and charming eyes added to the marks of divinity upon his transcendental person. His feet were marked with the auspicious signs of the flag and lightning. His entire exquisite form was decorated to enchant the minds of everyone. End quote. In this incarnation, the Lord's infinite transcendental beauty would attract all souls and sever their attachments to the material world, enchanting them with Krishna Prema. Srila Rupa Goswami, one of the 6 Goswamis, wrote, as recorded in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 19, verse 53, Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gora Trishe Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna Chaitanya, who is more magnanimous than any other avatar, even Krishna himself, because he is bestowing freely what no one else has ever given, pure love of Krishna. End quote. In Kali Yuga, the condition of human society is more degraded than at any other time in the cycle of ages. However, the Vedic sages glorify Kali Yuga as the best of ages, since in this age the most magnanimous avatar, Sri Chaitanya, has appeared. One should understand the nature of Sri Chaitanya's compassion. He gives the most degraded souls, the residents of Kali Yuga, the highest attainment, Krishna Prema, with the most sublime and simple practice, the congregational chanting of the holy name. Sri Chaitanya, the son of Sri Jagannath Mishra, a learned Brahmana from Sylhet, exhibited his transcendental pastimes for 48 years and then disappeared in the year 1455 Shakabda, 1534, at Puri in Orissa. The first 24 years, the Lord exemplified household life. He was the devoted son of his mother, Sri Sachi Devi, a daughter of Srila Nilambar Chakravarti, the great learned scholar of Navadvip, and married the most beautiful Sri Lakshmi Priya. At that time, Navadvip was the center of learning in all India, and even in his childhood, the Lord, then known as Sri Nimai Pandit, was unquestionably recognized as the crest jewel of scholars when he defeated in debate the great Kashmiri scholar named Keshava Kashmiri. While the Lord was away traveling and teaching, his first wife, Sri Lakshmi Priya, unable to bear his separation, left this world. At the request of his mother, the Lord married again in great pomp and ceremony to the divine Sri Vishnu Priya, displaying to the world the necessity of taking a spiritual master. The Lord was initiated by Sri Ishwara Puri, and from this point progressively changed from Nimai, the unconquerable Pandit, to Nimai, the devotee of the Supreme Personality, Sri Krishna. Sri Sachimata had 8 daughters before Nimai was born, and all of them had expired at an early age. Sri Vishwarup, Nimai's elder brother, soon left hearth and home to become a wandering sannyasi, and Nimai felt increasingly drawn to take this direction in life, the surrender of everything in devotion to the Supreme Lord. When Sri Jagannath Mishra departed this world, Nimai was the only support for his mother and new wife. However, the call of a life totally dedicated to the service of Sri Krishna was so strong, and at the age of 24, the Lord shaved off his beautiful locks to take sannyas. His sannyas guru was Sri Keshava Bharati, who bestowed upon the Lord the sannyas name Sri Krishna Chaitanya. After taking sannyas, the Lord made his headquarters at Jagannath Puri at the request of his mother, Sri Sachi Devi, and was based there for the remaining 24 years of his life. For 6 years of this time, the Lord traveled widely throughout India, particularly in the south. He met all the big religious teachers of the time, and in debate with them established pure devotion to Sri Krishna as the sublime goal and necessity for all souls. This he did upon the basis of the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam, the teachings of which he also propagated widely by practical demonstration, thus becoming known as Mahaprabhu, the great teacher. In this way, the August Harinam Sankirtan movement was. However, by the time Srila Bhaktivinode Thakur took birth on September 2nd, 1838, the sublime transcendental tenets of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had largely been forgotten. Born in the ancient village of Birnagar, Ulagram, in the Nadia district of West Bengal, Srila Bhaktivinode Thakur was the third son of Ananda Chandra Datta and Jagat Mohini, both of whom belonged to wealthy and eminent families. His father named him Kedaranath, a name of Lord Shiva. Talented and thoughtful from an early age, Kedaranath Datta began to search for the essence of life. After marriage and his studies in Calcutta, during which his great literary abilities became evident, this search led him to acquire copies of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita and Srimad Bhagavatam. After reading these two books, Kedaranath became an ardent devotee of Sri Krishna and Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, whom he termed the Eastern Savior. He took as his life's mission the revival of the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in their original pristine purity. Simultaneously, he pursued a career in the British administration that then ruled India, eventually rising to the most respectable position as deputy magistrate. In the late 19th century, Vaishnavism was under siege in India. Economic development and sensual pursuits were the program for the modern age. Vaishnavism was thought to be outmoded, and the truths of the sacred Vedas were obscured by rampant misinterpretation, speculation, and condemnation. In this atmosphere, only a very few Vaishnava devotees understood and properly practiced the sublime tenets of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. For the most part, the spotless transcendental pastimes Sri Krishna enjoyed in the spiritual world with Srimati Radharani and the other gopis, as revealed in the Srimad Bhagavatam, were equated with the condemned licentious affairs of this world. As a result, the pure Vaishnavism taught by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had largely been covered and had fallen into disrepute throughout the large sections of society. Inspired by his spiritual master, Srila Jagannath Das Babaji, Srila Bhaktivinode Thakur set out to revive the true teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, helped by his fourth son, Bimala Prasad, who would become the celebrated Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada. Srila Bhaktivinode started a vigorous campaign of preaching Krishna consciousness. The undaunted efforts of Srila Bhaktivinode Thakur knew no bounds, and great success followed his heroic struggles and campaigns. Books, essays, magazines, poems, songs, and commentaries flowed like the unstoppable Ganges from his pen. He founded many preaching centers for the distribution of Krishna Nam, and most notably he revealed the lost site of Sri Chaitanya's birth. In 1896, Srila Bhaktivinode reached out to the Western world with the publication of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his life and precepts. He sent this concise English work to various universities and intellectuals, particularly in the West. In that same year, Srila Bhaktivinode made a remarkable prediction long before the invention of the airplane. He wrote, quote, "A personality will soon appear in order to preach the teachings of Sri Chaitanya and move unrestrictedly over the whole world with his message." End quote. This year, 1896, was the birth year of Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who would fulfill the Thakur's prophecy in his later years with the founding of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Earlier, in 1885, in his monthly Bengali publication, Sajjana Toshini, Srila Bhaktivinode had called for the day when the fortunate English, French, Russian, German, and American people would take up Harinam Sankirtan in their streets and join with their Bengali brothers in diving into the ocean of Sri Chaitanya's love. Furthermore, in the same publication, the Thakur called for the day when all sects and religions of the world would flow like rivers into the ocean of Vaishnavism. This trio of predictions, which the world is presently seeing fulfilled, displays the spiritual empowerment of the great personality known as Srila Bhaktivinode Thakur. In recognition of his eminence, the learned Vaishnava community of the time designated the Thakur the seventh Goswami, according to him a status equivalent to that of the six Goswamis, the direct disciples of Sri Chaitanya. Any student of his life and works can only agree. Any student of his life and works can only agree. In 1908, the Thakur left household life, embracing the sannyas ashram with the acceptance of Babaji Vaish from Srila Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj, and would soon accept a number of disciples. However, in 1910, in Bhakti Bhavan, near the Samadhi of Srila Haridas Thakur, on the seashore of Jagannath Puri, the Thakur entered deep spiritual trance in uninterrupted meditation upon the transcendental Leela of Sri Sri Radha Krishna, largely oblivious to the external world. On the 23rd of June, 1914, precisely at noon, at this holy place, the Thakur departed this world to enter the eternal pastimes of the Lord. This was the same day that Gadadhar Pandit, the incarnation of Srimati Radharani in the Panchatattva, had returned to the Lord's unmanifest Leela some 450 years before. His legacy, freely distributing upon all souls of this world, is an exemplary spiritual life and an ocean of transcendental literature. This ocean comprises innumerable magazine articles and over 100 publications of songs, poetry, and philosophy. A major wave in this ocean is the Jaiva-gharma, published in Bengali in that momentous year of 1896. The book is set in Navadvip Dham, Sri Chaitanya's birthplace, approximately 100 years after his birth. The work is in the form of a highly entertaining novel, the central core of which is a series of dialogues between spiritual teachers and their disciples. There are also a number of debates on various topics between the teachers and antagonistic parties. Within this format, Srila Bhaktivinode brilliantly elucidates the philosophy, practice, and ultimate goal of transcendental life as taught by Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The book has 4 distinct parts that progressively illuminate the various levels of spiritual practice the fallen conditioned Jiva must pursue to be reestablished in his eternal Jaiva-gharma, transcendental love of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sri Krishna. Chapters 1 to 12 form the first part, which establishes the transcendental authenticity of Jaiva-gharma as distinct from all material activity. Chapter 1 clarifies the difference between pure Jaiva-gharma and mundane, materially motivated religiosity. Chapter 2 establishes Jaiva-gharma as a pure and eternal function of the soul, as opposed to the ever-changing flux of activities the fallen soul performs and the illusion of material conditioning. Chapter 3 expounds the prime necessity of renouncing all illusory material designations in the search for the Absolute. In particular, the relationship between Varnashram Dharma and Jaiva Dharma is debated. Chapter 4 establishes Jaiva Dharma, Vaishnava Dharma, and Nitya Dharma, the eternal function of the soul, as synonymous when understood in their purest essence. Chapter 5 explains that Vaidhi Bhakti, comprising the preliminary devotional practices that lead to the attainment of one's innate Jaiva Dharma, is a purely transcendental activity. In this regard, there are friendly discussions between the descendants of the Chandkazi, a Muslim-born devotee of Sri Chaitanya, and the renounced Vaishnavas. In Chapter 6, a Brahmana Pandit, offended by the friendly dealings between the Vaishnavas and the Kazi's descendants, debates the validity of this behavior. Jaiva Dharma is established as open to all souls without consideration of race and caste. Chapter 7 fully elucidates the terrific cycle of birth and death in the material world and how Jaiva Dharma frees one from such suffering. In Chapter 8, Vaishnava behavior is explained to a young devotee. This chapter describes the various levels of Vaishnavas and how one should relate toward the members of each level. Chapter 9 contains an interesting debate between a Vaishnav and a Shakta worshipper that contrasts the goals of spiritual culture with those of material advancement. Chapter 10 relates another debate, this time concerning the historical status of the Vaishnavism taught by Sri Chaitanya. The conclusion is that the philosophy and practices taught by Sri Chaitanya are eternal. In Chapter 11, a Muslim scholar challenges the Vaishnavas over their practice of deity worship. A fascinating debate ensues. In Chapter 12, Brajanath, a sincere aspirant to Jaiva-gharma, enters the book. He is given preliminary guidance in the principles of sadhana, regulated spiritual practice, and sadhya, the ultimate goal of such practice. We now enter the second part of the book, chapters 13 through 22. Jaiva-gharma, in connection with material topics, has been illustrated, so Srila Bhaktivinode moves on. I'll read that again. Jaiva-gharma, in connection with the material topics, has been illustrated, so Srila Bhaktivinode moves us, the enthralled readers, on to an elaborate exposition of the Dasha Mula Tattva, the 10 fundamental principles of the philosophy taught by Sri Chaitanya. Chapter 13 enumerates these 10 principles, which are divided into 2 categories: pramana, proof, and prameya, that which is to be proved. This chapter also expounds on the first 2 of the 10 principles. The first is pramana. The sacred Vedas are established as the ultimate authority in the description of absolute truth, and thus as the ultimate pramana, proof. The second principle establishes Sri Hari, Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as the highest manifestation of the absolute truth. Chapter 14 presents the third and fourth principles. The third principle portrays the inconceivable potencies of Sri Krishna, and the fourth illustrates Sri Krishna as a shelter of all rasa, transcendental mellow. Chapter 15 begins a trio of chapters discussing Jiva Tattva, the truth concerning the Jivas, the innumerable individual spirit souls. Chapter 15 begins the discussion with an elaborate exposition of the intrinsic nature of the Jiva. Chapter 16 describes the enslavement of the errant Jiva by the Maya Shakti, the external illusory material energy. Chapter 17 gives us hope by describing the liberation of the Jiva from the Maya Shakti and his establishment under the shelter of the Chit Shakti, the internal spiritual energy. Chapter 18 gives the ultimate description of reality, Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva, Sri Krishna's inconceivable and simultaneous difference from and oneness with every aspect of his creation. Chapter 19 moves us from Sambandha Tattva, the philosophical tenets of bhakti, to a trio of chapters dealing with Abhideya Tattva, the means for attaining the highest goal. Chapter 19 begins the trio by presenting unmotivated bhakti, uncontaminated by karma, fruit of desire, or jnana, empirical mental speculation, as the abhideya means of attainment. Chapter 20 elaborately elucidates the beginning stage of abhideya, vaidhi sadhana bhakti, regulated devotional practices impelled by chaste adherence to scriptural injunctions, scriptural stipulations. Sounds horrible. Chapter 21 takes us to the next stage of abhideya with a wonderfully informative presentation of Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti, devotional practice following in the footsteps of the residents of the transcendental realm and impelled by an awakening spiritual greed. Chapter 22 presents the final and 10th principle of the Dasha Mula Tattva, known as Prayojana Tattva, the highest goal of attainment, which is Krishna Prema, transcendental love of Sri Krishna. Now begins the third section of Jaiva-gharma, comprising 3 chapters, which presents Sri Nama Tattva, the principle of Harinam, the transcendental names of Sri Krishna. Chapter 23 begins with a panoramic presentation of the philosophical truths concerning Harinam. Chapter 24 discusses Nam Aparad, offensive chanting, and chapter 25 discusses Nama Bas, the stage of clearing offenses to Harinam. As the spiritual aspirant progressively frees his chanting of Harinam from offenses, the mercy of Sri Krishna enables him to progressively experience rasa, transcendental mellow. Thus we are led to the 4th and final section of Jaiva-gharma, which deals with rasa tattva, the principle of transcendental mellow. Chapter 26 begins with a general introduction to rasa tattva. Chapter 27 deals with samagri bhava, the ingredients of rasa, and the intermixing of these ingredients. Chapter 28 explains the central cause of experiencing rasa, known as mukhya rati, the attachment of the devotee to Sri Krishna. This attachment takes the form of various moods toward Sri Krishna. Chapter 29 presents the moods of Shantarati, attachment in neutrality, Dasharati, attachment in servitude, and Sakyarati, attachment in fraternity. Chapter 30 discusses Vatsalyarati, attachment in parenthood, and Madhuryarati, attachment in conjugal love. Chapters 31 to 37 expound the topic of Madhuryarati with the detailed descriptions of the constituent personalities, moods, and activities. The perfection of Madhuryarati is known as Sringara Rasa, which has 2 divisions: Vipralambha, love in separation, and Sambhoga, love in union. Chapter 28 introduces Sringara Rasa, the perfected mellow of conjugality, and describes Vipralambha in detail. Chapter 39 elucidates Sambhoga with particular reference to the Ashtakalya Leela, the 8-fold daily pastimes that Sri Krishna and his dear devotees enjoy in the spiritual world. In chapter 39, the topic is how the sincere aspirant can actually enter the transcendental Leela of Sri Krishna by undertaking the esoteric practice of Ekadasha Bhava, the assumption of the 11 items of spiritual identification. Also, the end of this chapter details the particular missions Sri Chaitanya gave his most prominent disciples. The final chapter, chapter 40, scientifically explains the progressive stages on the path of attaining the final goal of life, Krishna Prema, and the concomitant practices of each level. The book then ends with a final prayer and the Phala Shruti, a description of the fruit one attains by studying this wonderful book, Jaiva-gharma. At this point, the learned reader will appreciate how comprehensively Srila Bhaktivinode Thakur has presented this philosophy, practice, and goal of Vaishnavism as taught by his Lord Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Though the book displays the profound genius of Srila Bhaktivinoda, prema, transcendental love, is the wonderfully predominant mood. The sincere reader cannot help but imbibe such sublime nectar from the pages of Jaiva-gharma. Srila Bhaktivinode Thakur completed the book in 1896 on the appearance of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Undoubtedly, it is a further avatar of Sri Chaitanya, the literary incarnation of his teachings. May our lives be an attempt to repay the infinite debt we owe the great Vaishnava Srila Satchidananda Bhaktivinode Thakur for his sublime elucidation of Jaiva-gharma. Falling at the lotus feet of Srila Bhaktivinoda and all the Vaishnavas, I pray to become their eternal servant, Keshi